Good afternoon. And welcome to our panel discussion on the future of computing, the next 50 years. I am Tom Cormen. I am the chair of the Department of Computer Science here at Dartmouth and also the faculty chair of the steering committee for this whole event, and I am just thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled that you are all here. What we're going to do is talk a little bit about the future of computing, and as I was preparing this, I was thinking about what did we expect the future of computing to be, and I thought to my childhood, and I thought it was going to be that. Right? I thought we were going to have robots in our houses cleaning all surfaces. Well, what we got was this. It's a start. But then again, we've really made a lot of progress. Think about where we were in 1964. I found a couple of images of what computing was in 1964. It was that. Or sometimes it was in color. But we really have come a long way, and now instead of big rooms, we carry our computers around in briefcases or in pockets. And hearing a phone reminds me of two things. First of all, the discussion may get a little heated, and in that case, I need to ask you to please identify the nearest fire exit. There's the main exit in the back and two doors on the side. I feel like a flight attendant here. And then the other thing is, please silence your devices, because 50 years in the future, we're not going to have cell phones. So let's be futuristic now and not use our cell phones. We'll have something implanted in us or something like that. All right, I'd like to introduce our panelists. First is Michael Jones. He's Google's chief technology advocate, charged with advancing the technology to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Michael travels the globe to meet and speak with governments, businesses, partners, and customers to advance Google's mission and technology. And please welcome Michael. Next is Brian David Johnson, a futurist at Intel Corporation, where his charter is to develop an actionable vision for the future of technology. His work is called futurecasting, using ethnographic field studies, technology research, trend data, and even science fiction to provide Intel with a pragmatic vision of consumers and computing. So let's welcome Brian. And finally, our old friend, old in terms of that we've known her for a long time, Daniela Rus, used to be a faculty colleague here, but in 2004 moved to MIT, where she hasn't done that well. She's only director of the Computer Science and AI Laboratory at MIT. She's also the Andrew and Erna Viterbi Professor of Electrical Engineering of Computer Science at MIT. So let's welcome Daniela. So here are our panelists. And what I've asked them to do is speak for a few minutes on some questions that I'm going to show you. And then we will open the floor to questions. There are microphones on either side, and we ask if you're going to ask a question, please go to a mic. So here is the questions, or here are the questions that I asked. Looking at the changes in the last 50 years in computing, and the way that we interact with computers, what do you foresee in the next 50 years? In 2064, what will computers be? What new tasks will they have taken on? And how will people interact with them? Now, I was trying to figure out what would be the right order for speakers. And I realized I'm not capable of making that decision. So with the help of Professor Scott Drysdale, we wrote a basic program to randomly select an order of speakers. There is the basic program, and let's run it. Okay. So Brian will speak first, then Michael, and then Daniela. Okay, Brian?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. Computers, I guess, seem to like me. So as you're saying, my name's Brian David Johnson. I wanted to tell a little bit. So my job at Intel is to look 10 to 15 years out and model how people will act and interact with computers. Essentially, I model what it will feel like to be a human and live in the future, so that when I was asked to come and do this, it was interesting to me because it was a bit of a stretch. So I look 10 to 15 years out, and so looking out, this far was a bit interesting for me. But really, I'm a principal engineer at the company. It's my day job to write a spec. I write a spec that says these are the capabilities of the platform, and then I work with my colleagues to do that. I also wanted to introduce myself. This is a picture of me at age 13. This is actually 3 years after I started programming in BASIC. I was actually teaching and programming at a local university. You can pretty much tell everything you need to know about me by looking at this picture. I'm going to have you look right here. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a calculator watch, thus proving that I'm a nerd. I'm a huge nerd. I love everything science and everything science fiction, and those things come together in my world. In what I do, I'm constantly trying to break my models, trying to think, if we think this is what it's going to be like to act and interact 10, 15, 20 years from now, how do we break that? And so this fact is something that completely changed my vision for the future of computing. And this is kind of the basis for the little kind of vision that I wanted to give you today. What this essentially says is that as we approach and pass the year 2020, as we move into this time span, the size of meaningful computational power, right, the size of the chips that go into all of our devices, they begin to approach zero. So right now we're at about 12 nanometers, and as we approach the year 2020, we get to about 5 nanometers. And 5 nanometers is about 12 atoms across. And what that means is that we can turn anything into a computer. We could turn this lectern into a computer, we could turn my jacket into a computer, we could even turn my body into a computer. So as we look out even further, it fundamentally changes the questions we need to ask ourselves about the technology and the devices and even the businesses that we are building. Because for decades, and even leading up from the past 50 years of BASIC, we've had to ask ourselves, can we do something? Can we take a desktop and make it small enough to fit into somebody's lap? Can we take a laptop and make it small enough to fit into somebody's pocket or their pocketbook with a tablet or a smartphone? But when you can turn anything into a computer, the question no longer is, can we do it? But what? What do we want to do? And probably more importantly, why? Why do we want to do it? And it's a great challenge when it comes to the future of computing, because for decades we had been bounded. And what I see coming is that we will be living in a time where science and technology, where our engineering and our computers have gotten to the point where our only limiting factor is our imagination. That the thing that is holding us back is our inability to imagine a far more awesome future that we could then go and build. And so I think it's a challenge, and it's actually one of the challenges that's being met here at this school, is to challenge lots of different disciplines to get together and imagine a radically different future for computing. Also, the reason why I like to show this, because also we are talking about the last 50 years of BASIC, I love this graphic. Can everybody see the woman in 1960? She's the one with the bouffant hairdo. Some of you I know remember that. See the guy in the 1970s? He's got bell-bottom pants on. Can you see the person in 2010? Can anybody figure out who that's supposed to be? He actually raised his hand. You were so polite. What was your who? Steve Jobs. Thus proving that this young man right here is smarter than I am. Because I had this graphic up for like about a month. And I was presenting about it, and I figured it out when I was on stage in front of about 1,000 futurists. And I was like, look, that's Steve Jobs. So I called the graphics team, and I was like, did you know that that's Steve Jobs in my graphic? And they're like, yeah, it took you like months to figure it out. And then they did the thing that they love to do. They went, futurist, and they hung up. Now, that's it for my slides. I have my next slide really is sort of a way to orient your thinking as we sort of look a little bit further out. And one of the things that as we pass sort of the computation that we all know and love, that one of the things that I've been seeing when it comes to computing is the intersection between digital, biological, and inorganic chemical computing. We're at that time where we begin to see the coming together as we look to the next 50 years, where you actually begin to see this intersection, where even what we understand as computational power begins to change. That we start having things like self-replicating computational systems. That we have the ability to control and program down to the nano, even the molecular scale. And this might sound a little bit like science fiction, but I'll give you a very, very specific example that happened just last year. And I'm sure some of you have heard about it, where there was a group of researchers who took all of Shakespeare's sonnets, took half of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. They took the bits, they took the ones and zeros, and they had coded them into a piece of DNA. And then they took that DNA and they put it into a bacteria. And then they let that bacteria live. They fed it some sugar, and the bacteria did what bacteria do, which it just reproduces. And then they went and got one of the ones that had reproduced. They took the DNA out of it. They re-encoded it back into binary, and it was 100% accurate. Oh. Right? Number one, awesome. But number two, that bacteria became a hard drive. And that bacteria became a hard drive that you didn't have to power. You just had to give it a little sugar. And for me, that's just the beginning. That it forces us to radically reimagine what the future of computing could be like. And so let me, as I start to wrap up, let me ask you a question here. So who in here is a student? Raise your hand and keep your hand up. Who in here is a teacher? Everybody keep your hands up. Who has children? Who lives in a town where there's a college? Who is sitting next to somebody with their hand up? Okay, put your hands down. For those of you who had your hands up, this is a message for you. So, as we start to push ourselves and to think, what do we do with all this computing? What are we going to do and why are we going to do it? How can we radically reimagine how we think of computational systems? We don't even have a language. Just as in the very beginning, as we've been talking about BASIC, we didn't even have a language to take care and capitalize on this amazing power of computing. That as we make a leap forward, we actually have to go and fuel our imaginations. We have to do our math. Don't get me wrong. We still have to do that, but we have to fuel our imaginations. And so what I would put to you as you begin to ask yourselves, what will we do and why, that the why really should be, how do we take all of this computing and use it to make people's lives better? How do we use it to make people healthier and happier and more productive and more entertained? Because if we can do that, then we've set the bar correctly. And because you were here, and because you all had your hand up, all of you, I saw you, you are implicated in this. Because we all build the future. And you care. That's why you came to this. And so now it is your mission to go out there and start asking, what are you going to do and why are you going to do it? And how are you going to optimize and how will you make people's lives better? And then the final thing I want to leave you with as we think about the future of computing is don't forget about the stupid ideas. Don't forget about the crazy ideas. I seek out crazy ideas. You want to find the ideas that are so ludicrous that everybody thinks you were an idiot for working on them. Because from those ideas comes genius. That every idea was an idiot idea until all of a sudden somebody realized it was a genius idea and it changed the world. Thank you very much.
Well, that was inspiring from stage, hopefully from the audience as well. Well, I'm going to take, I wouldn't say a contrarian view, but a different way of thinking about the same issues. Basically, where do we look for the future? And I'm going to start by showing you 3 pictures. You may recognize some of those people. One of them might even be in this room. Hopefully the other ones aren't in the room, but I'm going to show you. I'm going to explain to you why I see the future when I see these people, and it's important. So those of you that are familiar with classical music, we'll recognize Ziggy Marley, and you'll know a song called "Tomorrow People," where he said, "If you don't know, if you don't know your past, you don't know your future." And if you've studied, you came to liberal arts college, you could have gone to like a nerdy college or a diesel repair college, but you went to a liberal arts college. You should know that one of the fundamental things about religious traditions all around the world is the encoding of the good lessons of the past and the bad lessons of the past as wisdom for the future. That's one of the fundamental activities. So that's worked out pretty well. So it also applies to technology. So I look at the past. And I want to give, just to set your brain right, so that's on the left, that's an airplane. And on the right, it's a car, right? Those were both introduced in 1960, the year I was born. And we can come basically 50 years forward, and we can see a modern car called the Mini, and we can see a modern airplane from Cessna. And what you can see is that there's they look not dissimilar, right? They operate in a way that's not dissimilar. One of them isn't like hydrogen powered or nuclear fueled or some crazy, bewitched kind of idea of the future. It's because they serve the same purpose. They take people that are about the same shape to the same kind of places like grocery stores, and so, or wherever. So they've evolved. There's actually no part common between the old one and the new one. No, not a single part. Not even the same people. They're entirely different. But if you were from outer space, you came back to the wrong 50-year interval, you wouldn't immediately know which one was the old and the new one. And so there's a part of the future, when we think about the future, we tend to think everything's different. And what I am interested in sometimes is not that everything's the same, I don't mean that, but what really could be different? Like if all the food was made of concrete, that wouldn't make sense, right? Because you couldn't eat it. So your grandparents would have died. It wouldn't work. So it's always about people. So we're going to think about people. That's our real past. So another way to think of it is what can change in 50 years, or maybe even in 100 years. Okay? In 100 years, the largest country in terms of population and area on the planet has gone from basically a imperial dictatorship that had lasted almost 1,200 years to a modern, kind of free enterprise fueled country. Free, of course, maybe it's a lowercase free, but still free enterprise fueled country that hosts the Olympics. Basically, if they didn't make all the clothes they make, you would all be naked. And being here, you might literally, freeze your butt off on the way home. And so that's 100 years can do that. 100 years can take 1 billion people and completely rewrite their everyday behavior. Even though 50 years isn't enough to make an airplane look any different. Right? There's a duality there. It's confusing. It's all different. It's all the same. Okay, so think about that. I mean, I don't know the answer. I'm just making you frustrated with the question. So this man, his name is Thomas Edison. I don't want you to read that. Don't worry about that. But what he said was, the most necessary task of civilization is to teach people how to think. All right? That's just number one thing. And there's a whole litany of brilliant people who said, if you could teach people to think, the world would be fantastic. We'd all be superhuman. So, I'm not going to attack anybody's university. I'll just say that brilliant people still want people to learn how to think. And the success of TV wrestling suggests that hasn't totally been, it's not totally accomplished. There's still room for you to add your own part to it. So I want to talk about education here for a moment, because I chose 3 areas where I think the future will be unrecognizably different in 50 years. Education is one. Okay, so the man in the middle, Alfred North Whitehead, is a hero of mine. He wrote a book called The Aims of Education. I suggest you should read it. Seriously, it's my favorite book on education in the whole world. And I've read a lot of them. Now, he said something that's really very simple, and I'm not going to make you read it, but I'm going to tell you this. His model of how humans learn is from constructive play. So the Froebel gifts would be an example. You play with blocks, and you stack them there, and they fall over, and you laugh. They sit there. Everything's funny, because it's all new. And after a while, you sort of notice that if you put the heavy one on the little one, it falls over. Put the little one on the heavy one, it stays there. And you can slowly build some sense of things like gravity and friction, and planar surfaces have more of it than a big thing on a little ball, which always falls over. So you build a kind of a basic perception. You don't know what it means. You're not a physicist, but you can tell that you put the big thing on the little thing, it's going to fall over. There's a certain understanding you develop. And then it becomes more precise over time where you can anticipate future events. Now, he thought that's how people learned, therefore he thought so you should teach them. Now, if you were there this morning at the movie, that's what the fundamental magic of BASIC was, is that it made people be able to play with a computer in a way that let them learn on their own schedule with no punishment for something that didn't go right. It wasn't burdensome to make a mistake. You just change the line and run it again until you get it right. That cycle is what made BASIC, I would argue, is what made BASIC successful. And that's how I think people learn. And I want you to test yourself. So you're students, you're smart, you're professors, so you're like more knowledgeable than almost everybody else in New Hampshire, say. So, what is your strongest memory of the third grade class you had? Like a theorem or exact learning. Does anybody have any memory of third grade? I mean, a specific thing you learned? Okay, so, fourth grade. Okay, it's like 5 people that have this eidetic memory. So I'm going to test you. Ready for this? Okay, ready? Remember that? You remember songs like Conjunction Junction or The King of Apes or games like one of these things not like the other? You remember that? Raise your hand if you know that. Okay, that's like basically everybody, okay? So like nobody remembers third grade because it was boring and stupid. Everybody remembers Sesame Street because it was fun. All right? So like who was your real teacher? No, I mean, I'm serious. It's important. People love BASIC. They loved it. Nobody said it was elegant. They just said it worked and it was fun. It was liberating. Okay. So what do smart people think about that? Well, let me tell you what Whitehead said. He said, look, the justification of a university is that it makes old people, like people that know something, and young people, vigorous young teenagers that want to learn things, puts them together. They can impart that with zest. And so that's otherwise you could just read a book. So learning is about people, talking to people, not just about the knowledge, the kind of playful part. Second, it imparts it imaginatively. And what that means is you learn something and you can play with it. Like you get the Legos, you get a new shape, you stick in all the old shapes. You know, you don't just look at it and say, oh, what a fine Lego. You actually, you do things with it. So this kind of thing, and the key thing is at the bottom. He said, look, if education was like it should be, this is so fantastic because it's never been this way in history of man. If education was right, a fact would no longer be a bare fact. It would be invested with all its possibilities. You see BASIC, and you imagine all the programs you could write, okay? You say, hey, it would be energizing as the poet of our dreams. So how many of your classes here at Dartmouth are energizing as the poet of your dreams? You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's what it could be. Why isn't it that? I don't know. But that means there's something that could be better. And what it could be, I'm going to skip this because I'm going slow here, and I just don't think I have time to tell you. This is so fantastic. I don't have time for it. This is the Khan Academy. This is a new university, or college in the New Hampshire way of thinking of things, that has taught more students than Harvard. Okay? It hasn't taught them better. It's not a replacement, but it's different. If you go online, you look for pictures, you'll find pictures of kids holding up signs that say, I love Khan Academy. You see a lot of I love Dartmouth people outside? You know what I'm saying? It's just, there's something magical about education. When people teach you something, you're so grateful. When it's fun, you're so thankful. And people aren't always grateful and thankful, so there's something wrong in how it's done. So the number one thing is, in the future, education might be more like Einstein said it should be. That it's as though you're being giving a valuable gift, not that you're doing a hard duty. Right? I think Kimney absolutely had that in his heart. It's fantastic to know, it's fantastic to share, and you're going to be all excited and aglow when I tell you, and we're all going to love how wonderful quantum mechanics is, or how wonderful the mean value theorem is, or whatever it is. It's wonderful to know these things. So that's a future. I believe that in this future time, basically colleges will not exist in the form they exist in today. I do think professors will exist, so don't worry about that. But I don't think they'll be doing the same thing. I don't have time to go into that, but that's thing number one. Education, it won't exist like you think of it now. The other sort of, I would say dinosaur, but the other thing that's different then than now is this. This is a traffic accident in the 1870s. This is not like a flat tire. It's more like a broken engine, okay? But at that time, people rode around in cabs pulled by horses. And there were people who brushed the horse after the end of the day, after the shift, and there were people that sat on top and did the thing with the whips and all. Those jobs no longer exist, right? There's very few groomsmen, at the taxi company, right? So 50 years from now, 25 years from now, there might not be drivers in cars, right? We have cars that go all over the place. Officially, they go to all the states that allow driverless cars. They might even go other places. But, if cars could drive themselves, if they never could have an accident, if they refused to come together, then maybe there wouldn't be as many taxi drivers. I mean, it's okay if they all lay on the beach in Aruba or if they all become astronauts. It's not that they don't have a job. If they don't have that job, why would they do that? So half of the jobs that exist today will not be jobs in 50 years. If you look back 50 years, half of the jobs people had then don't exist anymore. That's a big deal. Those of you that plan to live 50 years more, half of you probably will choose the wrong career. It won't happen. It'll go away before you get to the end. Think about that, okay? You get in the tax business, you'll be fine. So then a third thing is this picture. This picture on the lower right is considered the largest, most destitute slum in the world. There's a guy there with a mobile phone, right? So all these people, they're watching the Super Bowl in the upper left, and they're crazily all showing it to their friends and texting about it. So it seems like mobile phones are in, right? There's 1.5 billion computers, maybe 2 billion computers. There's 4 billion mobile phones. So the line crossed a while back. The people that don't have an internet and computer connection today aren't going to have a computer. They're going to have a phone. That's just what it's going to be. So whatever you can do with a phone, they can do. Whatever you can't, they can't. That's the way it is. There's more of them that don't have the internet than have it, so that's like a pretty interesting thing. So, when you think about what the future looks like, this is my friend Vernon Vinci. He wrote a book called Rainbow's End. I don't know if you read that book, but I'm the one that got him at dinner to put the part about Google book search in it. But in that book, everybody's wearing these little contact lenses that are kind of like looking through a heads-up display on life. So like Google Glass, but the future version is built into your eye or a little contact lens. So what will that look like? Here's what I believe. I believe that right now, about 22% of humans have access to the internet. 78% don't have access to the internet. Whatever you like about the internet, whether it's Facebook, whether it's playing poker, whether it's watching children's G-rated movies or something else, whatever it is, most humans have never even heard of that. And if they had heard of it, they'd wonder, well, why didn't you bring it to me? Because I would have liked it too. Okay? 4 out of 5. So if there was only 1/5 of us had polio vaccine, there would be a pretty big condemnation of us, right? So think about that. So what I believe is that 50 years from now, 100% access, 100% wearable. Now, whether that's goggles or whether that's built into your shoe, whether that's built into your cheek, that's we'll see how that goes. That's interesting. But you'll always be connected. There's something interesting about being connected that is subtle. I'll just bring this up real quickly. I'm not done. When you're always connected, then you can do things. There's a job partitioning task. Earlier we heard about how the basic system, DTSS, had one computer for talking to terminals and one computer for being basic. Well, you can think of the terminal, like the teletype or the terminal control computer, as like your mobile phone. But if without the thing at the back end, it's irrelevant. Okay, it's just irrelevant. Like how many people use a smartphone, and really like it, and there's nothing at the other end? Maybe for Angry Birds, that's good enough. For Google Maps, it's not enough. For texting, it's certainly not enough. For Facebook, it's not enough, right? You're not really using the phone as a phone. You're not really using the phone as a computer. You're actually using the phone as the front end of something that you're absolutely betting goes immediately to somebody else across a network. They have one too, and you're both symmetric at the end. Like the telephone system. If you had a phone but nobody else did, who'd want that? Right? It's end to end. So what that means is, if everybody's connected, you can count on doing computing in the middle. So cloud computing delivered to you. So just as a data point, when you do, if you're in computer science class, you might study parallel programming, multiprocessing, distributed systems. And you think, oh, if we had 8 computers in this problem, that'd be great. 32 computers, that'd be great. Okay. When you do a Google search, you're using 50,000 computers in parallel to do that search for you. We have the entire index of the internet online in RAM. When you do a search, it goes to all of the computers in a data center. They all search their part of the internet. they weave all the results together and give it back to you, then they go to the next person. Okay? So you're doing a 50,000 way parallel computing job, thanks to Intel. And the thing is, like, even if the computers were tiny, you probably wouldn't have 50,000 of them and exabytes of RAM in your shoe. Maybe, but maybe not. Because the update would be terrible. Plug in your shoe to get another exabyte. I mean, it's not clear. You know, so this idea of you're here with a terminal, you know, your phone is like your ASR33, your teletype. The thing that you never see is this magic giant computer system that's like as big as Dartmouth. And everybody gets to use it. That's really important. That's an important part of this tethered, ubiquitous networking world. And now, I promised I would end. One more modest suggestion for you, and that is to change the Dartmouth logo. That's how it is now, and my proposal is basically that you take that book and you just kind of put in a title page on the book. See, because what that voice was saying, learn about computation. It's the power tool for the mind. It gives you strength to solve the future's problems. And you just put that right, just put basic right there on the top, under the A. And then I won't charge for that, and that's my advice to you. Thank you very much.
Well, that was really great. I would like to build on what Michael and Brian said. Tom introduced me as the director of CSAIL, but that doesn't cover the other half of my life, which is to make robots. So that's what I do. I make robots, and I am an extreme optimist in terms of the role of computing and the role of technology. I really believe that computing is critical to all the important destinations of the human species, from going to the stars to scientific discovery and enhancing human life. And with the digitization of practically everything, we have a really opportune time to think about how to enhance computing the tool and how to make computing the tool have a bigger, more important difference in all the important problems that we face as a people, as a society. And I really believe that, so building on Brian showed you with computing getting gradually smaller, I really believe that we have an opportunity to blur the difference between what can be in the virtual world and what can be in the physical world. In other words, I think all of us geeks are very inspired to remove as much of fiction from science fiction as possible. And with my robotics passion, I have to say that I really believe that in the future, robots will be as common as smartphones and cars. Today, we see a robot, and that's an amazing object. But in the future, we will have robots all around us. So one question is, how do we get there? Because right now, making robots is really, really hard. And the state of making machines that can be programmed is like the state of programming before the invention of the compiler. In other words, it takes many years to build any kind of functional device, and it's mostly the inventors of the device that have the ability to use it. So if machines are going to be everywhere, how would that be? How would that work out? So here's my view for how this is going to be. I really believe that we will create a hardware compiler that will democratize access to machines for all of us. And so, for example, our user Alice, who goes to work every day, has a pet, a cat, and the cat is bored at home for 8 hours every day or more. So what if Alice could go to a Robo-Kinko's kind of place, which I will call 24-hour robot manufacturing, where equipped with some intuitive interface, she could specify, I want a robot to play with my cat while I'm at work. So with this interface and a little bit of support, just like you get at Kinko's today, the store figures out the design, creates the device and creates a programming language that is specific to the device so that Alice could go off and program her device. And the cat has a playmate. So Alice can do the same with any other task in the house, whether it's tidying up the floor space or cooking or cutting the lawn or retrieving the wedding ring from a vent. So how do we get there? Well, what if we can imagine creating the hardware compiler where you specify, I want the robot to play chess with me, and you type make. And within a few automated steps, the device is printed for you, equipped with a programming language for you to use it. So that is the dream. That means that if we succeed in making the creation of machines as easy and inexpensive as printing on paper today, we would be able to imagine a world where we can have one robot for every task, and where people can actually interact with the robots and use the robots. So today, everyone can drive a car without really understanding what the engine is. In the future, we'd like for everyone to be able to drive a robot and program a robot. And that takes us to education. So I would like to add to what Michael said about education. And I have to say I was very moved by the movie I saw earlier. There was a lot of historical detail I was not aware of. But the vision that everyone in a community can learn to program and can learn to use a computer is tremendous. And I really believe that computing, learning how to program, teaches you how to think. And that is very important. All right, so 50 years ago, everyone at Dartmouth programmed the computer. Today, in Massachusetts, 750 kids took the AP exam in programming. I'd say we went quite a ways backwards. And so what I would like for the future to be is the following. I would really like for the future to observe that in the 21st century, programming, the knowledge of working deeply with a computer, not just surfing the web, is as critical to our lives as reading, writing, and arithmetic. So I would like to posit that computing is part of our literacy in the future. And I would like to hope that everyone who wants to be literate will know how to program. It's not enough just to play with the web and play games on the computer. It's really important to learn how to use the computer in the most profound way computationally through programming, because that will teach us not just how to solve new problems, but also how to think. So, all right, so my final bit is, so I was going to tell you three things. My final bit is also about programming. And my big dream for programming, my first big dream for programming is that everyone does it. And it's part of our schools, and we just know that if we want to be literate, we know how to program. But I really see programming gradually coming out of the box. And so, in fact, I would like to posit to Brian that he's missing two boxes in his chart. Right, so you're stopping at ubiquity, where you have computers connected with every other computer everywhere in the world. But computing is getting increasingly more physical. We are proceeding to increasingly more physical instantiations of computing, and that means that we are adding sensors in our computers, and we are giving our computers the ability to affect the world beyond just computing in bits and bytes in a box. So if you take a brain, a computer that can compute with bits and bytes, you add to it sensors, and you add to it the means of impacting the world, you actually have a robot. So the next box in your progression has robots in it, and in fact that connects to the idea of one robot for every task that can be synthesized extremely fast and extremely inexpensively. But then there is a box beyond that. And the box beyond that is also related to what you said, Brian, where we can turn all the objects around us into computers. But what if we can do more? what if beyond computing in bits and bytes, we can start thinking about the physical properties of the objects that we interact with, and we can begin to program their properties. So what if we can program, say, the optical properties of the objects around us? I would love to be invisible, so I would love the invisible cloak once in a while. And then I can also be really visible when I want to make a point and I need to break into a conversation. What if we can program elasticity? What if we can program acoustic properties? There is such a, what if we can program shape? So there is such a huge list of potential problems and opportunities if we can imagine taking computing outside of the box and putting it in the physical world. So with this, I would like to stop, and so I guess these are not predictions, but these are just wishes. So I'm not so good at predicting the future, but these are ideas that I would like to see implemented and carried in the future. Thank you.
Okay, at this point, we invite your questions. So if you do have a question, there are microphones on either side, and we'd be happy to take questions. Dan?
I'd like to juxtapose this moment in history with sort of the moment that surrounded the discovery of the ability to split the atom. And there was a significant ethical conversation with respect to the forward progress of that technology. And so in an imagined world where we're all tethered, we're online 24/7, there are big ethical questions. There are big moral and societal questions. So this is a big question, but I'm curious to hear what our panelists think about that dimension of the conversation.
So I can start. I guess even today we're in a world where with so many sensors, we have just about anything. So just about anything that can be learned about us, it is being learned about us. So how can we retain privacy? This is part of your question, Dan, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly part. And the tangency, of course, the basic is that Kemeny had a very strong social vision about the extension of computing to everyone, because he was trying to build. So the idea of basic being at a liberal arts institution is that students were, quote unquote, being raised in a very broad pedagogical environment. So there was, you would imagine them being well versed in history, in philosophy, and so that the integration of computing with their greater humanities and social education would then presumably produce citizens who were thinking broadly, not just about creating shiny new things, but the implication for shiny new things with respect to the way we interact with each other and the way in which the world moves forward. So privacy is certainly a significant part of it, but there are many other dimensions to it.
All right, so maybe I can start talking about privacy, and then we can go to other broader ethical issues. So here's my point about privacy. I think that the data that we have available to us today has the potential to improve our lives in huge ways. But the privacy issue is very, very important. And in fact, we have seen with the NSA scandal and lots of other recent press that this is a serious question. So I feel like computer science got us in this mess, and I also feel that computer science can get us out of this mess. And in fact, there are we have the hope of practical solutions to the privacy problem. We have mathematical models that show us how we can compute on encrypted data. So if we can, without decrypting the data, this is through homomorphic encryption. And so if we can imagine making these techniques practical, and if we can imagine putting people in charge of their data in a way that has guarantees, that gives people confidence that whatever is available about them in the whatever digital footprint they have, they actually can control who sees it, when and how. I think we can conquer this problem. And in the process of doing this, I think we can also open the way to huge new applications. For example, we can, pretty soon we will be able to sequence ourselves very inexpensively, $100. So imagine if all of us create a database with sequenced DNA. We can use that to understand disease and to understand treatments in amazing ways. But how to do that without putting people in danger with respect to their privacy data, with respect to their insurance companies? So let's bring this idea of homomorphic encryption into the picture and convince people that this is actually a practical solution. We can create systems that allow people to control how the data interacts with third parties, things like that. And we will have a win-win situation where we can take advantage of technology to solve important problems, but not at the risk of individual privacy.
So I'd like to take that question too, because there's another part to it that needs to be talked about. So a few weeks ago, I sent out mail to all the employees of Google, and I said, I'm going to be in Dartmouth talking about or celebrating the 50th birthday of BASIC. And if any of you, like I had, learned computer programming and fell in love with it through BASIC, send me a note, and I'll appreciate it. I'll relay that, or I'll be informed by that. So the last couple of days I've been talking to people based on those things. But I sent mail to Larry Page last night and to Eric this morning, and they both wrote right back and said, oh yeah. Larry said, yeah, that was my first programming language. That's why I don't know how to program. And Eric said, oh, absolutely. I learned it in high school, and then we had the system, and I modified the system, and then I worked for the high school modifying that, and so he gave me this long, speech. He's supposed to be busy, running the world or something, but he's actually a long speech, how much he loved BASIC, right? So I got, that's pretty typical. I got hundreds of responses like that all across Google. But one was really, really especially interesting. It was from one of the engineers, and he said, I took a programming class from Professor Kurtz when I was at Dartmouth. And he described him as coming to, just before he retired. And he said, I won't go into it, but he said he came to class all the time with one shirt tail not tucked in, his hair kind of wild, and he had sort of the Einstein look about him. But he said he taught us about how viruses work and how worms work and how computer security exploits are known to be done. He wasn't teaching them how to do it, but he was teaching them how it's done, what Robert Morris had done. And he said at the end of the class, he said, now I've taught you how to be bad. I've taught you how it works, so you know enough now to do wrong, to do harm, to be bad. But I beg of you, as educated people, to use your knowledge for good. And that was the lasting lesson he had of the ethic of Dartmouth, which was knowledge and wisdom together, okay? Or knowledge and values together. And that's what he shared with me at Google about what he learned at school here. Now, that's always true with knives, guns, I sleep with my wife in bed, we're laying there, I'm asleep. I'm stronger than her, but when I'm asleep and she's awake with a big axe or something, she could have the advantage on me and kill me, right? So you know what I'm saying? If she was a killer, I'd be dead, But and maybe I deserve that, The thing is, it's not that she doesn't have an axe; it's that she wouldn't use it on me. And that's an important thing. You think all these people that don't drive over you is because they don't have a car. No, it's because they don't want to drive over you. They have a car, they just don't want to drive over you. And so when we talk about technology used to hurt people, in general, you're talking about people using technology to hurt people. And in general, you're talking about the criminal mind or kind of an uncaring mind, in any case, or at least an uneducated mind. And so there's an education of the spirit that must happen in step with the development education of the technology. Sometimes you don't think you know enough for that. And I'm not dodging your question. For example, with nuclear technology, it worked really well. Let's just put it that way. It worked really well. That is the notion, we put stuff in here, put some dynamite in there, and we'll hit the button, and it'll make a big boom. It worked really well, okay? Especially with Ivy, Mike, Castle Bravo things. So, took out islands, vaporized islands. It would work pretty well. It would be a deterrent to almost any low-grade criminal or menacing country, right? It's worked too well. So, United States and Britain and others decided, this is, one person of poor judgment could take out, New York City or take out Cuba or whatever it is. That's just too much because there is an Idi Amin somewhere or whoever. So they put it under lock and key. They built these layers of protection, onion type stuff. So basically there are some technologies that maybe you can't put the genie back in the bottle, but you can make sure the bottle's inside a safe. And that's inside a safe, and that's inside a safe, or store it on the moon, or whatever you think you have to do. You only want one mistake to happen. But other technologies, you can just say, look, don't open it up because you might get electrocuted. If you open it up and touch things, you might get electrocuted. It's a Darwinism, it's okay, so to speak. So there's a realm of dangers, and society tends to adjust to those dangers. And so all I would say is that, like the NSA thing, the outrage was, I can't interpret for the world, but it seems like the danger was greater than people realized. And they're disappointed they hadn't taken better measures. Or, sort of like, I didn't know it was so dangerous. I think if we all understood better what everything means, we'd actually be in a better position to make those trade-offs. So I think education is crucially important. I think if people understood the harm they can cause by what seems to them like a teenage prank, but in fact is the end of somebody's life, they kill themselves. There have been students kill themselves because of things that are done abusively. If people actually knew the guy was going to kill himself, the girl was going to kill herself, they wouldn't have done that. They weren't killers, the abusers. They were just immature bullies, but they didn't realize they were playing with death. So there's an education problem and a responsibility problem, and I think is a big part of our job in computer science now, not just to teach programming or to teach making robots, but to explain why it matters your robot doesn't run over people's babies. That is, they go together, and that education is a permanent burden that we all have. And I think we should take that really seriously.
May I?
Jenny.
Hi. I'm John Kemeny daughter, and thank you all for being here today very much. Sylvia, you said something very near and dear to my heart, which was that the value of programming is teaching people to think. And that was an incredible motivating force for my father. Excuse me. And for those of you who were here this morning in the past session, there was an era in which the importance of thinking was seen across disciplines, where social science programs were being written as much as math programs. And I think it was a very powerful time. And I was struck by the fact that you also, as I personally do, think that we've gone backwards in terms of the degree to which programming as a device for clarity of thinking is accessible. I think it's a language issue. And I acknowledge that I'm biased. But you could teach a third grader to program, and the basic manual was so clear that a sixth grader on their own could learn to program, and they could learn in a couple of days. Basic fell out of favor for a lot of reasons, largely because bastardized versions there were versions that were inelegant and not powerful and became the norm, and so we went elsewhere. But I don't believe, I was a professional programmer, and I tried to learn, I took what online documentation I could find, and I tried to teach myself a couple of modern programming languages. I could not do it. Both the design of the language and what counts for documentation is just so completely different. Do you believe that so finally I'm getting to my question. Do you believe that there's a language today that would allow this kind of ubiquitous return to programming?
So I don't know that there is one specific language, but I believe that there are ways of making programming attractive and cool for all in all levels of school. I believe that it's possible to get first graders to be really excited about programming if the problems and the language or the interfacing tools they have are exciting and are written for their level. I don't believe that you put first graders in front of Java and you get them excited. So I think that it's totally possible to do this. And I would like to share just a short anecdote. So I actually have a digital literacy and computer literacy program that CSAIL is running, and we go to faraway places and we try to get people excited about programming. In particular, a few years ago, we went to a cluster of islands in Fiji where we put one laptop per child, per school. So we gave each school in this cluster of islands one laptop. And you have to understand, so these are places where there's no electricity, there's no running water, kids don't have shoes, there's nothing. They paint coconuts white, and that's their game. They live off the land. And so there are places like this on our planet. And school is usually not valued by these kids very much. So after the laptops, I went back the next year and I took a bunch of bee-bots. So these are little robots that look like bees, and they have 4 arrows where you can make a simple program to get the robot to follow a path that you might lay on the floor in tiles. So these kids who were so inattentive in their classes and who disrespected the teachers got their hands on these devices, and you couldn't get them out of the classroom. It was break time, it was lunchtime, and they were still on top of each other trying to figure out how to get this bee to follow the path. And so I think in this case, we have actually given them a tool that matched their level of interest, and that got them excited. And they actually learned a lot about geometry, they learned a lot about systems of coordinates fixed on the body versus fixed on the world. So there are lots of very valuable lessons that they learned. So I am actually very bullish about the tools. I think we can easily get the tools and put them in schools. I think the big challenge is working with our education boards to get them to accept computer science as a valuable activity in school, because today in most states in this country, computer science is treated like shop. So you take programming and you don't get credit for graduation. And somebody told me yesterday that we are thinking of canceling the AP exam in computer science and programming because people don't sign up. So I think this is tragic, and somehow we have to figure out a way to rectify the situation. But we have organizations like code.org, and we have other, so we have advocacy groups, and I'm actually optimistic that we will overcome this local low.
Other countries are doing it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Lots of other countries are doing mandatory programming, and we are falling behind from that point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a cultural thing. I mean, I don't know where you went, but there you are, hi. So as a futurist, I spend most of my time traveling around talking to people about it, and everybody asks me, how do you prepare for the future? It's always this question, as if people are preparing for this, like the future is coming at them like a raging rhinoceros, and it's going to take them out. And what do they need to do to prepare? And it doesn't really work like that, but what I tell people is learn to code.
And coding is
No,
cool.
no, don't. And then I just look at them. No, don't. That's it. No, if you want to know how to prepare for the future, learn to code. If you don't know how to code, learn. If you have kids, teach them to code. If you have kids, especially young ladies, teach them to code.
So
And then wait, stop. Stop. You got to look at them. See, this is the thing, because everybody kind of knows it. The longer you look at them, like, oh, okay. And I've actually done this enough that I actually now get emails from people who actually say, oh, I actually did. There are places to go, and you can go online. You can go to Khan Academy. You can go other places to do. Because the thing that is amazing about it, and this goes to what you just said and what was amazing about the documentary, is that when you learn to code, it's another language. It's how we talk to computers and how computers talk to us. There's going to be more computers in the future. I'm the type of futurist that doesn't make predictions. I actually go about sort of building these models for the future and then actually go and make them. But I don't make predictions. But what I will tell you is we will have more computers in the future than we have today. So it would be good if you could talk to them. So learn to code. But also the thing that you learn is you learn 2 things when you learn to code. Number one, you learn that coding and that algorithms are absolutely gorgeous. They are beautiful. PageRank is beautiful. It also gets our friend here paid. But PageRank is amazing. The other thing that you learn is that computers and algorithms are stupid. They're really dumb. I mean, the way that an algorithm works is you do a step, you do a step, you do a step, you do a step, right? You understand that. And it also allows you to value what human beings are really good at. Because it turns out human beings are really good at some things that computers aren't really good at. But by learning to code, you actually begin to understand that, and you start teasing away, you start teasing out those things. And so I actually, for me, I usually just stop at just learn to code. Like, period. End.
Okay, my turn. Wait. So first there's a...
I did give a shout out.
No, that's great. That's great. Intel's a wonderful company as well.
Yes.
Yes. So, and MIT is a great school.
Oh, and I love robots.
It's a university though. It's not a college. So
It's an institute.
no, there goes the institute. There's a legitimate basic in JavaScript that runs in a browser with no install. You just go there and you got basic running on your window. So in that sense, it's available to billions of people. It's not, Bill Gates didn't screw it up and then keep you from getting at it. It's not like that. I mean, it's available if you want it. You could be that basic. You could write a real basic. You could do true basic. You could, it's like religion. You could have any sect you like, and you could give it to 1 billion people today. The question is whether they want to hear it and what the environment around that is. Okay, so everybody can see every movie, but they don't see every movie. They see some movies and not others. So the question is, how do you make it fun, exciting, word of mouth, the thing to do? So at some level, it's easier than it ever was. Doing things on the web, whether it's in the cloud on some server or built onto your browser, whatever, there's nothing. You just click and then you're there and you do stuff. As an example, not competing with BASIC, but I'm on part of a team or part of an effort to build a open source programming language. We do it at Google now for 3 years, called Go, or 4 years. Widely used, it's one of the most rapidly growing languages. Its designers are pretty competent. They did Unix, they did C, they did a variety of things. And it's like old guys trying to repair the sins of their youth. Okay, that's the way to think of it. And it make it simple, orthogonal, as minimal as possible. Not as minimal as BASIC, not as simple as BASIC, but able to run things like Google search at full speed. So it's sort of a little bit further on the maximum efficiency, but still easy to use. It's not quite as easy to use, but it's able to do more elaborate things. We have a playground online where you can go there and type in your code and it runs. There's no installing anything. There's no doing anything. The documentation is very good. There's all clever things about it. So people are working on that. And so I'm not saying that's the new BASIC. I'm just saying there's one. We did one. So, you could do one too. That is, it's not like unique to us. We just did something. It's a handful of people. There are things that aren't programming languages in the normal sense that are programming languages in the logic and structure sense. There's a thing called blocky, which is like putting a puzzle together that executes as a computer. It's popular with preschool kids and early kids. Seymour Papert's logo certainly taught about body-centered coordinates and independent Cartesian coordinates, and anything that draws, anything that moves is pretty cool to people. There's a game called Minecraft. Minecraft is arguably the BASIC of today's children. I mean, I'm serious. It's a programmable thing. It's visual and fun. But it's smart too. There are things that aren't programming that have the essence and aura of programming. Programming I think is beautiful. Programming is math. Algorithmics is math. And it's different than math, because math, even though you do a proof step by step, your proof is step by step, but the underlying truth you get to at the end was true the whole time. It's not becoming true as you do the steps of the proof. It was always true. You just have a path through the truth. With programming, iteration and other things cause the truth to only be manifest at the end. So it's a developing truth, and that's a part that's missing from math, but is present in programming. You can teach that in things that don't look like computers and don't look like programming and don't even have a renumber command. You just give them a Sudoku puzzle and say, solve that. If you can get people to think that's an interesting challenge, then they're 80% of the way to their master's degree at MIT. You know what I mean? Because it's the same critical thought about dependencies, interrelationships, and causal. It's maybe 40% of the way at Dartmouth, but farther, at MIT. So I mean, it's not like it has to be, basic to the return. It's not like that. I mean, it could be. That's great.
It'd be a good trailer.
That's great. Yeah, with a chainsaw, and Kimney and Kurtz with it. The thing is, it's not. It could be. That's fine. It could be totally different looking, and nobody can even tell. So I can tell you that there's one more thing I would add. When you mentioned schools, I'm going to talk about hating schools for a minute. So 3 of my friends and I sat at my dining table, quit our jobs, sat at my dining table, we wrote a program. And then we made a little company, and we quit our jobs, we made a company, we went out, and we got funding, we built this thing. We sold it to Google, and that's now called Google Earth. So more than 1 billion people use this thing I wrote every single day. Now, I should be happy about that. Actually, almost none of them are in schools, because schools thought that it was like a bandwidth hog, that all the kids wanted to see the world and learn geography. It's unbelievable. I've been all over the country. They're like, oh, this uses way more network than bandwidth than Microsoft Word does. I'm saying, well, it's flying over the damn world, like it's awesome. Oh, and so they've had 6,000 years trying to get people to study geography. They finally love it. And the schools, put up a barrier against it. Okay? So, there's something in the educator, not the professor part, but the dean part, that just changes, into Captain Queeg or something. I don't understand. I don't understand it. If you love students and learning, why wouldn't you love all the? So I'm just saying that there's something that's not just the return of BASIC and its beauty and in modern form, but maybe or the same form, whatever. There's also teachers want it, parents support. There's an aura to it. And here, your father arrived like some kind of a Christ-like figure of brains, the imprimatur of von Neumann and Einstein, and said it will be this way, and everybody bowed to that. And then they found out how great it was. It was like green eggs and ham, where it's like God making you eat the green eggs and ham. At the beginning, it's only a one-page book. You eat it, you say, oh, it's good. It's a shortcut, right? So without some kind of, motivating function, maybe forcing function, maybe whatever, you have this case where less people program at Dartmouth now than they did 50 years ago. Think about that, or 49 years ago. How terrible is that? I was meeting with some students the other day. They were asking me their questions, and one of them said, what do you think about this thing where we can maybe don't have to take all these forced classes in other non-topic, thesis topic areas, I'm thinking, well, you don't have to be a liberal arts school at all. You could have gone to the diesel maintenance school, but if you came here, why wouldn't you study like the classics and the poetry and Greek, whatever? Why wouldn't it be Dartmouth instead of the Stevens Institute of Technology where all you do is weld all the time or whatever? You know what I'm saying? And so you used to do that. Your leadership supported that. You're famous for that. You ignited the world, and you turned your back on it. I don't know why you did that. I can't give you a new backbone. I don't know what your problem is. But it's certainly unfortunate. Nothing personal, of course. The other deans, Yeah.
What I very much appreciate you bring up is regardless of what tool you have, educational context makes it happen or not. But even so, I'm going to push back a little bit. I admire Logo, I love all of those languages, but they're not general purpose languages. They're very specific. The beauty of BASIC, beginner's all-purpose code. This is a tool that if you gave a 7th grader, they could write anything. And my concern is that if a school said, here, take the entire 7th grade population, all of them, the dunces, the people who hate math and whatever, okay, go teach them programming. The reason BASIC went on fire is because people could do anything with it. And I just don't believe there's a language today, and I look forward to see what you've got.
Check out Go, right?
That is, so much of what's been written is very focused on the web, on visual and so on, that there isn't actually a language that all kids would catch on fire with because they could do anything.
Okay, so your statement is a good one, that nothing's as good as BASIC in the ways that BASIC is good, and if there was such a thing, you could support it, but if there's not, why isn't the great thing honored as it should be? I'll rephrase that.
I want something like it out there.
Yeah, and I think we could all agree with that. We wouldn't have come to this convocation. That's why we're here.
Okay, let's take a question over here.
Hi, this question is hugely related to this topic. I've been a programmer for 35 years. I learned BASIC in middle school, came to Dartmouth and studied computer science here. And in those 35 years, I have seen the way that programming has changed distressingly little. Programming in theory is great and beautiful, and algorithms are beautiful and all of that, but a lot of it is more like doing your taxes, frankly. For people here who aren't programmers, there are a lot of little things you have to keep track of all the time or everything goes south. And so much of programming, much of modern programming, depressingly, is writing little tests. You actually, there's a whole school of programming that's very popular right now where you actually build the tests before you build the program. How exciting is that? And not. And in fact, Jaron Lanier, who's a great thinker about technology, many of you have heard of him, I'm sure. And when the Mac OS came out based on Unix, which was popular in the 1970s, he said that if he knew that the big new thing in the 21st century was going to be Unix, he wouldn't have had the heart to stay in computer science. And so you've just spent a lot of time talking about whether or not you can get people interested in programming with the current set of programming technologies. My question to you, since this is about the next 50 years, is can we even think in the next 10, 15 years, is it going to be different than, source control and include files and namespaces and all of this just stultifying stuff that you have to do to be a programmer to make the thing happen that you want to have happen?
Well, I'm an optimist. Now, being a futurist and declaring myself an optimist was like the most radical thing I had ever done. Because it turns out people really like pessimistic futurists. Right? I believe the future is built every day by the actions of people. That literally we build the future. But the future doesn't happen. It's not an accident. Right? The future is built by people, by schools, by companies. And so this notion to me is, well, why wouldn't we build an awesome future? Let's not build a future that sucks. Let's actually build a really good future. So I think we can all get on board with that. And getting to your point, I mean, so much of sort of the way that you're looking at it and the way that a lot of the schools that I talk to and the companies that I talk to is I think everyone would agree with you. I mean, you could get into the details of sort of different programming languages and things like that, but ultimately everybody is going to agree that we need more people who know how to code and we need more tools and more intuitive ways for people to act and interact with technology.
Can I just briefly say, the product I've been working on for the last 10 years actually turns Photoshop into a programming language for graphic designers to build websites, so they don't have to know anything about coding. And that's kind of where I'm coming from. Is a lot of these people don't want to know about binary searches and they want to know how to make their design come to life.
Well, and there's some really amazing tools out there. So there's sort of my friends at Autodesk are taking 3D designs and literally having designs where you take a 3D model of an object, say it's a robot or an articulated arm, and all you do is grab that arm and move that arm around in the 3D space, and it programs the arm. That's all you need to do to program is actually just move the arm, right? We've got, Rod Brooks's, Baxter. You teach Baxter by literally showing the robot how to do it, physically showing the robot. That's how you program, is by moving the robot. And the robot actually makes it better. It actually optimizes it. So I think there are ways to do it. So what I would sort of put back on you and put back on everybody is that, yes, this needs to happen, and the only way we do it is by doing it. That's it. That there actually is no secret. But one of the things that can help, and one of the things that I've seen happen, is the way that you change the future is you change the story that people tell themselves about the future that they will live in. And it sounds really simple, but it's really powerful, because if you can do that, so whether it be the future of computing or the future of robotics or the future of programming, if you can change that story that people tell themselves, whether it be through school or communities or through media, people will actually do different things. I've seen it happen at companies, I've seen it happen at schools. People will actually make changes. And that's part of it as well, is to go up to people and say, here's my vision for the future. Here's what I think we should do. Here's what I'm doing about it. What do you think? And that's how you make change. I guess I could spike a football. I'm done.
So I agree with Brian, but I would just like to say one more thing. So there is a difference between learning how to think computationally, and so that means learning algorithms and what you do for software engineering and how you actually create big systems with intuitive interfaces. And I think we need all of them. I think that it's really valuable to learn how to think computationally. And so your web designers can take advantage of these amazing interfaces, but it would be really valuable for them to know how to think algorithmically. I'm not sure that quicksort is the right function for them to learn, but things like that.
So I want to You're done.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to say same thing she said, but just a little bit. It's really important to understand there's a spectrum of behaviors. So are any of you Formula One race car drivers?
Well, I actually...
Okay. No, wait. So Formula One race car drivers and taxi drivers, dump truck drivers, they're all in the same bucket of just basically people are ignorant about automotive engineering that are good at using an automobile. Okay. Real automobile science is how to design pistons, how to design cooling systems, how to design baffles, rings around pistons and things. Those are automotive engineers. Okay, so in computer science, like using Facebook is not becoming a programmer. Okay, when people say, "Oh, you work at Google, how do I program my Wi-Fi network?" I was like, "Look, it's on Google Earth. It's not the same thing as like plugging in your monitor. It's a different, act. So there's a confusion about what is a technician and what is a scientist of computer scientists. And then it's harmed, nothing against Intel, but by the universal dominance of Intel in the CPU field, nobody wants to study how to build a better CPU unless they work at Intel. It's not nothing personal. It's just that it doesn't make a lot of sense for 10 people to make CPUs because there's only 1 or 2 companies that aren't going to go broke making CPUs, maybe 3, but that's it. I mean, number 4, I used to work for one of those. They give up. Okay, so but it was smarter and better. It just didn't have the volume. Therefore, the economics of manufacturing made the better design irrelevant, and that's an issue. And so there's a science part, better computer architecture. Arvind at MIT and other people work on interesting things. And then there's physically realizable products from profitable companies. And those are 2 separate things. What you've seen a lot of in the last 2 decades is a lot of centralization in computing. Now, at Google, we can't complain, I guess, about that. But the thing is, but what I mean is that does create kind of a smaller gene pool of sorts. So there's maybe less people working on Eclipse. 10 years from now, 50 years from now, my prediction, the Eclipse will be even bigger and slower. That's my prediction. Okay, you know what I mean? It's kind of like So the thing is, like, so hopefully somebody's going to like fight that and make something svelte. Like Go, for example. You should check out Go. But
Go is really hard.
Okay. But basic, whatever. The thing is, your artists don't need to program a computer. They need to use a computer. It needs to be closer in its manifest expressions to their manifest intent. So there's like a semantic problem, a semantic gap. That's the bigger gap. If you close the gap, they can be like just drivers and not automotive engineers, right? So a lot of people confuse those two. I just want to say computer science is a science. It's like a mathematics. Mathematics comes from Euclid. He wrote mathema, what one knows, because you actually know math in a way you don't know, like your neighbor's cooking skill. You already know something when you know about the square root. And so programming is like that. But the people who actually care about that, I was 10 years old when I read Art of Computer Programming with Donald Knuth. I memorized that book. I worked on all the problems. It's like my Bible, sort of. Nothing personal against the Pope, but it's like a Bible. I don't know anybody else like that. Maybe I'm on stage with them, but it's not like most people want to do that. And most programmers, parents send their kids to school, learn about computers. They're thinking, go learn how to program a computer, you can get a job at a computer place. They're not saying, go write a better compiler or work on, IPC, work on exception management. They're not. Nobody's thinking that. Like they're thinking it. I'm thinking it. IBM Power 8 architecture team is thinking it. But it's just not it's not computer science. Most people think they're computer scientists. They're highly competent programmers. But that's not a bad thing. But that's not the same thing. And I think the solution to your angst is going to come from computer scientists. Self-assembling robots, say, or you paint a picture and you say, go paint ones like that, or that sort of world. There's a computer science AI thing behind that. That's not a UI of Eclipse kind of thing. It's just a different realm. So I think that's important. I know it's a speech, but it kind of an answer. But I think it's really important. It's terrible the way things are. It's really terrible. I agree with that. And BASIC was at least a unified environment where things made sense. Alan Kay, my buddy Alan Kay, did Smalltalk where the whole thing made sense and was dynamic and interactive and introspective. It was fantastic. So there are people tried, but what Apple took from seeing the Alto was to make it not flexible, but pretty. So that's what happens when companies get a hold of science.
Okay, let's go to a question over here.
As a software engineer, since before there was BASIC, I second what Ms. Kemeny said. My question, however, is futurists have poor track records of foreseeing what was unforeseen. What do we currently not know that could inform your visions?
Well, I'll take Mr. Zeno's question over there. You know, we don't know the future, obviously, and nobody knows the future. As the people that give you investment advice, they say, I know the future. If they did, they would be investing, right? Not selling books on investing, right? Nobody knows the future. What we do know are areas, for me at least, I know areas where people want something they don't have, and the thing that would give it to them is becoming buildable, more affordable, less intrusive, lighter weight, or whatever. So if people like all-bought telephones, and then you say, I can make a small portable telephone, you can say, people would buy that because it would be even better than the one on the wall. It's not about, you know, that is, it's not a deep thing about Viterbi encoding. It's a shallow thing about humans like talking to other humans. They don't like, and they all have the, well, if you students are too young, but the adults here, you see these phones, and the cords are stretched as much as possible. People tried to get as far from the wall as they could. There's a coiled cord is all stretched out. So, like, obviously they wanted to get further. You know, they went to Radio Shack and bought extension cords, you know, for the phone. So mobile phones are going to work really well, right? I mean, that's obvious. You know, so I mean, when I'm predicting the future, I'm not saying we're all going to have 3 heads or something. I'm just saying, look, like right now, GE has made their engines so they have temperature sensors and all inside all the turbines as they run. And they get a megabyte per second out of each blade. It goes to the central part of the 787 Dreamliner. It gets sent by computer network to the airline. They forward it to Boeing. Boeing has a contractor work by GE at Boeing. They diagnose the engines, and they ship replacement blades and parts for that engine to forward destinations for that plane. So you've got a little problem developing. By the time you get to 3 hops and you get back to Phoenix, there'll be a part there waiting for you. You can fix it that night. That's great. Machine shops measure drill presses to see if the bit starts vibrating. It's going to break soon. I should change that on the line before it breaks. So those kinds of, I mean, obviously people want intelligent devices. They want them to make life better, to avoid problems. My car says, wait, you've got a low pressure in your right rear tire. It's 2 pounds less than the other tires. That's awesome. You know, it's not like some weird science fiction robot thing. It's just an air pressure gauge. But the fact that it tells me, reports by exception, what's wrong, that stuff is incredibly important. So I think when we think people want, like, you know, better, faster, cheaper, when they want more convenient, more trustworthy, more reliable, more informative, pretty likely. You know, it's not hard to believe in those things. So I think what we don't know as a industry or as a educated society is we don't know enough. We don't choose to think enough about what it means to be human. We listen to marketing messages too much. You should look at what people really want and say, how can that need be met? Are people lonely or whatever?
So for myself, I mean, literally as a futurist, everything that I do, to pick off what Michael said, is everything that I do is based on humans, first and foremost. Everything that I do. So in the process of future casting, I have a team of social scientists, of anthropologists and ethnographers who go out and study people all over the world, have been doing it for over a decade. They don't study markets, they don't study demographics, they study human beings, how they live, how they shop, how they worship, how they die, right? Human beings are wonderfully complicated. We are weird, and it is awesome from a design standpoint, right? Our diversity is what makes us awesome. And so you start, and that's the basis of everything that I do. And as you heard me say earlier, ultimately I think it's my job, and the bar that I set is to make those human beings' lives better. You can make it better, like anybody tells you in a business school, if you can solve a problem for somebody, you can make a business. All I can say is if you can make somebody's life better, you know, that is going to be incredibly important. So earlier on, kind of like Michael said, I was actually in a group a lot like this. But it was actually in Silicon Valley, who were much more rude than you people are, by the way. Like Silicon Valley, they're very rude. I had somebody said, could you have predicted email? And I said, well, I don't actually make predictions. I refuse to make predictions. If somebody gives you a prediction, they're usually trying to sell you something. That should just be a flag. And so I say don't make predictions. It's really my job to come up with a spec so that I can work and we can actually go and build it. That's what I do. I'm a builder. But with that said, I said, could I have predicted email? Yes. And the guy was like, oh, Intel's futurists could have predicted email. And I was like, yeah, I could have. Because there's this thing we had before email. It was called mail.
That's right.
And it was really popular for a really long time. We solved the problem. We made people's lives better, right? We also made it with spam was a little bad, but you've got the good and the bad. So that's one side of it. Now, I'll get nuts and bolts with you for a minute. So in my job, you played a little debate society thing on me, by the way. That was a foul. You can't do that in debate society. But how do you know what you not know? How do you know the things that you can't know? And my answer to you is you don't. You don't know them. And in the modeling that I do, it's almost like a catastrophe. Or innovation, actually. So what I do is I look 10 to 15 years out based on all these inputs and say, this is kind of the way we think the future is going. This is the future we want. This is the future that we want to avoid. Here are the steps that we need to take today, tomorrow, and 5 years from now to go there. And then we start. And we say, okay, we got to build these fabs. We got to do this. We got to work with these companies. Got to file these patents. And we just sort of do the work and the engineering work of what we do. Invariably, something will happen. Right? There's an incredible amount of uncertainty in that future. And so what I tell people is it's the exact same thing. You respond to innovation, you respond to the things that you don't know, the same way you respond to a catastrophe. You don't respond to a catastrophe. You don't respond to an earthquake in Japan a month before it happens. You don't respond to it a month after it happens. You have to get out there, and you've got to keep sensing and talking to people. This is kind of why I spend most of my time on the road. And the moment you see it, you go to it. And you talk to people. And you find out what's going on. And you create a culture that then can react to it. And you create, in this sort of future casting work that I do as a futurist, is then in that you embrace that uncertainty. You embrace actually the things that you don't know. And what I do is I literally physically fly all over the world seeking those things out. Because that uncertainty, and remember, I work for an engineering company where uncertainty, like I tell them, uncertainty is awesome. And they're like, you're crazy. And I was like, but uncertainty is the landscape of innovation. Out of uncertainty comes these great ideas. But you've got to go there. You have to create a culture that goes and searches it out and then actually changes the model for what you know of the future.
So I would just like to add a quote from the movie we saw earlier. And one of the early programmers tasked to build this compiler said, yeah, we started doing this and we had no idea that the task was impossible. I mean, so in some sense, there are things we know that we know, and there are things we think we know, but in fact we don't know. There are lots of things that we don't know, and we don't know that we don't know them. But altogether, bringing new knowledge in the world is about having the courage to jump and just do it. And so there is a necessary risk involved in that, because if we knew everything, then, well, what we would come up with would be kind of boring. It would be absolutely, totally predictable. But bringing new knowledge in the world really requires that we have the courage and we don't worry too much about what we don't know.
Yeah, I think, if you think about great surfers, they might say, I'm a better surfer. I know I'll do a better job today as we go out. But they don't know what they're going to do. That is, their sport is reactive to the wave. Right? It's a great poker player, say, reacts to the cards they get. They don't know what cards they're going to get, but if they're a really good poker player, they win a lot anyway. So there's the greatness in some of these things is your ability to respond, observe and plan and respond to an unfolding circumstance that you have no control over. You have no delusion that you made the wave. It'd be insane if you thought that. But you control your feet, you control your balance, you decide what 1, 2, 3 fins on your board, what kind of whack. There's things you control, but they're pretty lightweight. But how you choose to use those controls is your genius. And that's the kind of reality of what it means to be an innovator. It's not to just know the future, build it, everybody salutes you. It's to know which Lego blocks you could build, and from those which interesting things you could build, and the customer wants something, and you make the parts, or some sort of more sophisticated version of that. But you don't I don't think you ever know the future, but you certainly know how to prepare for it into some basic way. In New Orleans, they have more sandbags now than they had before Katrina, and they know where they are. You know what I mean? That's the kind of smart people, at least they get better after each mistake, right? Stupid people do the same mistake over and over again. So like that's the difference. It's not the lack of mistakes. It's the presence of learning and positive feedback. Okay.
Well, when this session started, we knew that we would be going for an hour and a half into the future, and that future has arrived. So I want to thank our panelists, Michael Jones, Brian David Johnson, Daniela Rus. And thank you all for coming. There is a reception in the pre-function area of the Hanover Inn, and you are invited to that reception.